And I was going to say welcome back, everyone, but I guess technically... Well, I guess it's welcome back if you watched this video from the other Deathmark videos, the other Deathmark 2 videos, I should say. But yeah, so for today's video, it's going to be a very quick one. Essentially, I just want to kind of give my thoughts on, now that I've completed Deathmark 2, what are my thoughts on it, and that's going to be informed by my thoughts and feelings on Deathmark 1, and I want to say it's NG Spirit Hunter was the second game. So, kind of like, heads up, there will be spoilers later on, and I'll give a warning for there, but before that, I figure if anyone just wants to watch this to kind of get an idea for what I thought about the game, should I buy the game, am I going to like this game, like, if you're just searching around looking for impressions on the game without actually having to worry about, like, spoilers for gameplay, that's kind of what this video is for. Which, I'm going to try and keep the background imagery to be pretty plain. Should just be basically, credits, the back of credits, stuff like that. So, but yeah, what are my thoughts basically on Deathmark 2, having played it? And again, this part is no spoilers, but I'll give a heads up basically when I'm going to get into spoilers. Overall, I did enjoy the game. It was pretty much what I expected / wanted, and that's going into it. I'm looking for a spooky horror time game. I want some ghosts. I've always been particularly fond of ghosts in my horror games because I feel like when it comes to like body horror mutant style things, that it can have the veneer of like, well, why don't I just shoot or hack my way through it all? And, especially with stuff like survival horror, sometimes that is the semi-intended way to go about the game. But with ghosts, it's a lot more tricky. Like, love the Fatal Frame series. Probably my favorite horror series, but, I would say overall, pound for pound, my favorite horror series. Though I think individual entries of other horror things can sometimes supplant that. Love Silent Hill 2. Haunting Grounds, I have an extreme fondness for, even though I know it's kind of a bit of a jank game. Things like that. So, for Deathmark 2, it gave me what I wanted. So at the end of the day, it was worth the purchase in that particular regard. And, I like seeing these particular devs continue to refine their process. So, it's interesting to see how the game differs from past versions and the overall iterative process it is a design team working on a franchise over a period of time, and how they kind of improve things. Now that said, I would argue that Deathmark 2 is probably the weakest of the three. Now, again, that's not to say it wasn't fun. I enjoyed my time with the game, but there were a few aspects that I didn't enjoy as much as previous entries. And I do know for this particular one, they had to do... I don't think it was Kickstarter that they did, but I know they did one of those crowd fundraising platforms to kind of get money to be able to make Deathmark 2. So it was already a bit of a Hail Mary, kind of. Which, makes me a bit worried about the future. I want to see more of these games. So despite it kind of being the lesser of the three, I still want to see more. I still want to see whether it's in, an NG Spirit Hunter 2 or a Deathmark 3. I want to see that. Like, that'd be cool. And so to really kind of get into why I felt it was weaker of the three, this is where I will be transitioning into spoilers. So, if someone's on the fence about basically buying this game, I'd say if you're really in the mood for I would say, B tier, some could argue C tier type horror game. That's a full horror game. So we're not talking complete indie. We're not talking like 1-2 hour asset store bought horror games. But there's a lot of good ones like that out there. And maybe they're not always asset store bought, but like, it's that weird plasticky model type look. So it's above that. This is a full horror video game. So if you're looking for a full horror video game and you really have the itch, I'd recommend basically going ahead, do the purchase. If you're kind of in the mood for a horror game, like let's say it's not really the spooky time season, you're like, I could go for a horror game, but I got a lot of options out there. I would say get this game if it's on sale. In all cases, I would say don't get this game if you have not played the previous two first. Like, this one has not a ton of callbacks. You could play this game not having played the previous two games, but there's enough weird allusions to them kind of dancing around previous game events that you're going to feel a bit more lost. So I would recommend basically playing the other two games first, or more specifically, the first game, Deathmark. So NG is already kind of slightly disconnected. It's the same universe, same world. There are allusions to Deathmark in it, and there are similar themes. So I would argue it's in the same series, but you could probably skip NG and just do Deathmark 1, Deathmark 2, and get most of the references in Deathmark 2 just fine. So if you're on kind of the fence, wait for it to be on sale. Like, get it, grab it when it's like maybe, 75, 50% off. If you're kind of like, alright, well, I played Deathmark 1, it was fine, it's not Halloween, I want a horror game. That's when people like, yourself, if you were that potential customer, that is when you should probably pick up this game. Alright, so now with all that said, now we get into spoilers about why I feel it's the weakest of the three, and what I think also it improved over the previous two games. So, I'll first give people essentially a rough 20 seconds here to kind of, if you're afraid of spoilers, turn off the video. If you're away from the computer, listening to this, not at your computer, or it's playing on the TV via, Amazon Fire Stick, or insert equivalent here, run over and be like, alright, turn off the video now. But yeah, from here on out, we'll get into spoilers and rough, hazily, vaguely remember specifics regarding the first two games and how my impressions of those guide how I felt about this game. Sorry, it has been slightly over 20 seconds, but alright, now let's get into spoilers. So yeah, I mean, not too much of a shocker, but like, right off the bat, I did not like the whole teeth, the cursed teeth, the rotted teeth. Having to find those up and level up your stats like that, that was really annoying. And obviously this isn't really spoiler territory for that particular regard, but just me kind of getting to the nitty-gritty here. What is semi-spoilerific, basically, is that while I didn't like the find the teeth, the level up collectible side system, I did enjoy how they changed basically combat, for lack of a better term, in this game compared to the other two games. I remember basically in Deathmark 1, there were certain suspensive acts where, like, you're being timed. And in all three games, the localization has some rough spots. Like, I would just be taking damage for kind of what I considered unfair reasons in the previous two games. That, like, this new system, I can take my time. I can ponder stuff over, kind of go, okay, maybe I should try this, maybe I should do this. That said, this system is still far from perfect. There is a lot of polishing to do. The whole team up with people, and some acts are different, but some acts are the same, and percentages, the ratios all change, and there's still a right and wrong answer, but you have all these percent odds, and half the time, like, failing doesn't seem to have too much of a consequence beyond the initial health cost. Like, all that stuff was really weird. So, the bare bones systems of, like, I have time to choose stuff, I think there's potential in the whole, like, team up, don't team up, like, here are the modifiers, how to do it. I think that was an improvement. There was a lot less vagary when it came to, like, the each level's boss conclusion of kind of being like, oh, I know the items I need to use, but I don't really know the order, because, like, it was very much like, pull item out of your inventory and rub it on boss, and did it work or did it not work? Oh, it didn't work? Well, you're dead now. Like, that was always a bit rough in the first game when it came to that boss fight. That's, a lot of times with that, it's kind of, you're doing semi-save scum stuff to kind of go, like, alright, just reload, that didn't work out, do it again, do it again, do it again. So, mechanically, I would say this game is better. The perspective of exploring the school, of the kind of like side-scroller perspective, I think that's probably the most fair way to describe it. That, I go back and forth on. I didn't hate it. It didn't add a ton. The previous two games had more of a first-person, I don't want to say a labyrinth view, but it's all first-person view. Like, you have a top-down kind of like vague idea of the map, and you go to the different sections, and each section is a first-person view of you looking at the section. There's a ton of, wizardry-inspired type RPGs in Japan that all kind of derive their system from that. So, if you ever seen any of those, it's kind of like that. So, I could take it or leave it. If they had kept the old system on that regard, I'd have been fine with it. Had they, moving forward, if they keep the side-scroller stuff, I'm also okay with that. So, they are with fine. I will say, speaking of the side-scroller sections, the entire game being limited to a school was, I get it. It could work, and it did work, but it wasn't as interesting, in my opinion, as the myriad of environments that the previous two games would be able to do. Like, there was definitely a feel in the other games where it's like, okay, this chapter's ghost is, Deathmark 1. There's, the sewer section with the old, Japanese World War II, not bio-warfare, but, spiritual warfare unit down there, that chapter. An NG Deathmark, there's, the whole chapter with, that unique shopping street with the weird, dog butcherer ghost that appears underneath, radio towers, there was a lot more room for doing cool stuff and unique types of ghosts and how they interact with the environment in the previous two games, versus this game, them all kind of being tied to the school. They tried breaking up a bit of, with the chapter with Kashima, where it's you take the bus, and you can get off at the bus routes, and oh, there's a hospital, and there's a graveyard, I'd kind of thought, oh, maybe we're opening up entirely, but yeah, I felt that it felt a bit too hamstrung in that regard, so I do wish that they had, I don't know if it's budgetary reasons, they have to draw these unique things per whatnot, but I do think keeping you tied to the school, not majorly, but hurt the game a bit. Speaking of basically the stages, I felt like the ghost selection in this game was a bit limited. I mean, there were three unique chapter ghosts, right? There was Hanako the Toilet, Kashima, Slipmouth Kashima that is, and Mr. Kokuri. You still have, the ultimate baddie, but those were kind of your three. And I felt like with the other games that you had at least 5 to 6. That might be me misremembering, but I felt like there was a greater selection of unique types of big bad ghosts to fight, so that was also a bit of a step back in the end, I would say, for Deathmark 2. Speaking of which, as well, there were some really weird, not really weird, there were some peculiar narrative choices in this game, both in comparison to and separate from what the other games did. So, for example, during my playthrough, I'm seeing the doll, I'm like, oh, dolls, they're gonna do stuff with dolls, because it's again, we're in spoiler section, if you played the previous two games, the dolls are the big bad. First game had, I believe it was Alice, who kind of plays up as kind of being all chummy, and then, at the very end, she goes full-on horror demon, and irredeemable ghost. And in NG, you had Kakuya, who less monstrous per se, but still very extremely monstrous. That was another thing with this game that I kind of felt peculiar, where I felt like the main character, Yashiki, from going from the first game to this game, I get the idea that, he's a spirit doctor, he wants to help save these souls. It's yeah, but in universe, there are legit horrors that aren't necessarily human. They're weird things that go bump in the night that are just evil. Like, and Yashi should have better known than being like, oh, maybe I can help them all. Like, that kind of kept driving me nuts. It felt like he was kind of handed the idiot ball for no reason outside of, like, you need to reset the character. Which, if you're going to need to do that, might as well have it be a new character. Because that's another thing about Death Mark 2 that's really weird, is that there was kind of that vibe of, like, hey, it's all the people from the first game. They're coming back to assist you. It's like, I mean, cool. Like, you know, I was happy to see they're all still kicking, and, you know, good to see some of them back and, you know, on the case, as it were. But, like, you know, could have been new characters, honestly. Like, you didn't have to go back to the original well, even if you want to keep the main protagonist. To, again, if you're going to keep the main protagonist, have a bit more growth. I felt there was a... Yashiki kept making really dumb moves, and it's like, that kept driving me nuts. And yeah, the doll thing, it wasn't bad. Like, I get subversion of expectations. Like, first 2 games, dolls as the big bad. Third game, they tease a doll early on, not the big bad. It's like, okay, that's fine. But overall, though, it kind of felt that it felt like that the red doll was only there to subvert expectations and kind of being a red herring. Which, I mean, red doll, maybe it was, you know, purposeful for, you know, oh, it's a red herring. But, like, I wish that they kind of explained more of, like, but why? Like, they kind of glossed over it, being like, why was it a red doll? Oh, you know, the old original founder of the school was just kind of really big into Western stuff. It's like, okay. I mean, technically you don't need more of a reason than that, but still kind of weird. Alright. I will say, though, I did enjoy the little twist there, that the Departed was 2 ghosts, and it was both the students that were trying to help you. Like, that was pretty neat. I enjoyed, you know, it got me. I thought it was like the red doll and Kinikawa. I was just like, oh yeah, that's totally how it is, but it was not that in the end at all. Well, okay, it was and it wasn't. Like, the weird soul swap, the girls are saved at the end, that was a bit weird, but I get it, you know, you want to have a happy ending sometimes. Not all horror games need one, but sometimes horror games are too depressing in that regard, so yeah, like, there were just a lot of constant gnawing things kind of throughout when compared to the previous 2 games, that I didn't quite get what I was looking for in that particular regard of, like, I want Death Mark 2. I want a new game in this series. I felt I didn't get the full promise of that. Like, 80%, 85% I did, but, like, it's definitely been watered down. And again, I don't know if that goes back to, since I had to do crowdfunding for this game, you know, other 2 games were very niche, so maybe they didn't do well enough to really get the full corporate backing budget that they needed to do a proper 3rd game. So they kind of met halfway of like, alright, you know, on a shoestring budget, here's what we can do. And it's like, again, I do want to see these guys continue doing stuff. I don't want this to go away. I enjoy Death Mark 2, that is why I enjoy the concept of Death Mark 2, which is why I bought it, and having played it, me, personally, I do not regret my purchase. I'm glad to see it, I'm glad that they're doing stuff, and I want to keep seeing it. But it'd be fool of me to say that this is on par with the previous 2 games, because it is not. And so that's kind of why I consider it the lesser of the 3 games. But, okay. I think this video is kind of going on long enough. Oh, that was weird. Alright. My mic cut out, but yeah. So this video is kind of gone on a bit long enough, but yeah, I really wanted to get my thoughts out there, you know, put a bow on it, basically. I wanted to kind of sum up everything. Also, you might have noticed a brief little audio cut here, because my mic turned off on me randomly, but alright, that's solved now. But if you notice that weird choppiness, that's what happened. But yeah, that covers my thoughts on the series. Again, if you really, really want a good horror game that's like, you know, B, maybe C tier quality, but, you know, the full chunky, you know, 8, 10 plus hour horror game, go for it. If you want a horror game, but you have a lot of choice, you know, maybe on discount, with the caveat, you should play the first one first. The first one is a better game. The first one, lends itself to this game with all the references. You'll pick up on some of that stuff. So, with that in mind, pick it up on sale. And if you're not in the horror games, then yeah, you don't need to buy it. If you would regret, if you wouldn't get a full value out of spending money on it, don't get it. It's like, I don't say it's a waste of money. I think, you know, hey, sometimes I buy games that I don't intend on playing because I want to support the devs, because I'm like, I don't like it, but I do know, as someone that, you know, I have experience with game design. They've made a good game. I want to be like, yeah, this game isn't for me, but you know, I want to get this at the very least. If I have a friend that's into it, I can go, hey, friend, do it, yeah. So that's kind of my thoughts. But yeah, all right, that's it. I will call the video here. Those are my recommendations. Those are my thoughts. And yeah, and with all that, that is the end of Deathmark 2 for right now on this channel. I don't think there's any reason to go back and play it, so. But maybe. No, there's not really any reason to go back and play it. We got all the endings. You know, I guess maybe if I want to get that last tooth, but I do not. I do not want to get that last tooth, because it was a pain in the butt. So, but yes, those are my thoughts. And until next time, everybody, see ya, goodbye, and I really need to think of a better signing off phrase. Signing off? Nah, that sounds too formal, but I'll think of something, maybe. Who knows? Alright, but until next time, everybody, goodbye, and see ya.